my focus, as Michael mentioned, will be on this study, which is very, very close to launch and to screening and enrollment. I will, though, give some background on how we got to this question and why the study is important and what we hope to learn. So please feel free to stop me at any point, ask questions. I'd love to hear discussion and thoughts and feedback. If I can hone in on the question a little more beyond why do some individuals gain excessive weight on ART, really the question that has come up and that needs to be answered is, why do some people gain more weight on specific meds compared to others? And is the issue the new meds, or is the issue the older meds? And I will get more into that, but to set the stage, I think that really is the foundation of the question. And talking about weight is complicated. There are so many factors that go into weight for everyone, but really the focus here is the differential weight changes that happen with certain ARVs compared to others. So I'll get more into the weeds and the detail here. So by way of a little bit of background, and you all know this, but many individuals with HIV these days take integrase inhibitors. That's the dolutegravir, the Biktarvy, raltegravir. I'm going to focus less on elvitegravir here because it's not included in the study necessarily, though I'll come back to that. But it really has become the cornerstone of ART, of HIV therapy these days. And there are tons of benefits to integrase inhibitors. Overall,
Brian, I was going to ask you, do you know the brand names, not the generic names? Because I think most people don't know the generic names, and I often try to translate the drugs that they make it as.
Thanks, Michael, for jumping in, because I was specifically trying to steer towards generic names, but I'm happy to fill in the brand names here. So dolutegravir, or Tivicay, you can also find that in the combo pill Triumec. Biktarvy is what's in Biktarvy. Raltegravir, also called Isentress, we don't use as often these days, but still is a very good and sometimes used medication. So those are the integrase inhibitors of most interest here, because they are the ones that are used so frequently. Again, we recommend them frequently because they do have a lot of benefits. And it has been shown that individuals who take those compared to other things, the NRTIs, the PIs, tend to stay on the meds longer, tend to have viral suppression, and tend overall to have fewer side effects. Though, of course, everyone is different and side effects happen. And there are a lot of things that we cannot predict. But these really are the cornerstone of therapy these days. The other thing that many individuals take, either for HIV or for PrEP, is TAF. So that's tenofovir alafenamide. I'm going to abbreviate it as TAF, and that's what's in Descovy. So that's one of the NRTIs in the pill Descovy. So again, a cornerstone of HIV therapy and of PrEP. And the important thing about TAF is I'm going to compare it to the older NRTI, the older version of it, which we refer to as TDF. That's the NRTI in Truvada. So many people take integrase inhibitors, many people take TAF. There are known documented benefits of those. What has happened in the last few years, since 2016, 2017, is a growing number of reports that people who take those medications, let's call those the kind of newest medications, those integrase inhibitors and TAF, over time gain more weight than individuals who take let's call them the older options, the NNRTIs, that would be the efavirenz, for example, and AAA, or than people who take protease inhibitors, or than people who take the older NRTI combo, TDF, like Truvada. And this is important because over time that may increase risk of things like high blood pressure, diabetes, cardiovascular, MI and stroke and other cardiovascular events. So thinking, not just about weight as a phenomenon we experience, but as all of the long-term risks, I think this is potentially important. What I've put here, and I'm not going to go through all of the studies, there are a mountain of them now. Interestingly, when this first came out, the biggest question was, well, is this real? Do people taking integrase inhibitors to have really gain more weight than people taking the older meds? And I think that question has been answered. There are enough studies now that consistently have this finding that I think the answer to that question is yes, this seems to be a real thing. What I've shown you at the bottom here is just one example. This is from a study where almost 7,000 people switched from TDF, that's the NRTI and Truvada, to TAF, the newer NRTI, the Descovy. So basically a switch of Truvada to Descovy while keeping the other medications in the regimen the same. What you can see there, time zero, just right of middle, is time of that switch. And on the y-axis is weight. So you can get a sense that before time zero, okay, weight is largely stable. Maybe there's a little bit of increase over time, not unexpected. There's a switch, and within the first 9 months or so, there's an increase in weight. On average here, it was about 2.5 kilograms. So, just shy of 10 pounds, and then weight stabilizes again. And I think that's a pretty consistent finding with individuals who switch their Truvada to Descovy. Now, is the issue the Truvada or the Descovy? That we don't know, and that I'm going to come back to, because I think that is a critical question.
Brian, can I ask a question about
me? Yeah.
What is BPI?
Oh, thank you, Michael. That's boosted protease inhibitor. So the different colored lines are individuals who were taking meds from each class. INSTI is a abbreviation for integrase inhibitor, NNRTI, and then boosted PI. That was their anchor drug, if you will, and then their backbone drug switched Truvada to Descovy. Yeah, appreciate the question. Please keep them coming.
Did anyone else have a question they wanted to ask before we go on? Okay, just don't be shy. If you have a question, you can interrupt politely, or you can also raise your hand and I'll call on you that way if you want to do that. Okay.
Very, very much agree. Thanks, Michael. And so let me just show you one other example. Again, there's a fair amount of these. This was one of the first reports actually that triggered all the interest in this. So here, instead of individuals who switched their Truvada to Descovy, this was individuals who switched Atripla. That's the dark box here, if you can see my cursor, the EFB, TDF, FTC. That's a Fabrin's TDF and FTC. That's Atripla. So individuals here, there are about 500 overall, switched from their Atripla either to an integrase inhibitor or to a protease inhibitor, if we look at these top two boxes. And you can see those who switched to an integrase inhibitor gained weight over time after the switch. Those who stayed on Atripla didn't. Those who switched to a protease inhibitor didn't seem to experience that same trajectory of weight increase. And if we look on the bottom, this compares which integrase inhibitor individuals switched to, either on the top DTG, ABC, 3TC, that's Triumec, that's dolutegravir with abacavir and 3TC, or lamivudine, versus switching to the other integrase inhibitors. And you can see in both of the integrase inhibitor switch groups, people did gain weight over time, more so with dolutegravir. And in the bottom right, they're just showing here that the largest increase in weight were those individuals who switched to dolutegravir. So what has come out has been a consistent set of studies that has shown that integrase inhibitors, especially dolutegravir, especially Biktarvy, in some studies raltegravir, though that's less consistent, individuals who take those integrase inhibitors do seem to gain more weight than individuals who take NRTIs or the boosted protease inhibitors. And similarly, individuals who take TAF, the newer NRTI, what's in Descovy, seem to gain more weight than TDF, the NRTI that's in Truvada. Now, I think there is a big caveat to that, because I think it would be really easy to hear that and say, okay, we should not be using the integrase inhibitors, we should not be using TAF. And I do not think that is the conclusion. And the reason is there are so many unknowns. So first, we really don't know why this is happening. And I'm going to talk more about that, because I think it's really key in my mind to discussing why studies like the one we're going to get into are important. So the question becomes, is what we're seeing a side effect of the newer meds? Is it a side effect of the integrase inhibitor, the Tivicay, the Biktarvy? Are they in some way stimulating appetite, or affecting our fat cells and making people gain weight? Is it some direct side effect of the new med? Or is it that the older meds, the efavirenz, the tripla, and the TDF and the Truvada, were actually suppressing weight more than we realized? And the other thing that has come out is that it seems that Truvada suppressed weight more than we understood, more than we realized. And tripla, the efavirenz, the NRTIs also seem to suppress weight, to affect the mitochondria in a negative way and prevent weight accumulation, or actually suppress weight more than we ever realized. And so it may be that what we're, Michael, if you don't mind, I'll finish. Oh, go ahead, Michael.
I was just going to say, how much weight are we talking about the suppression?
Yeah. So great question. Let me finish off that thought and then turn to that.
Okay.
So it may be that what we're seeing is actually the TDF, the efavirenz, the older meds were suppressing weight in some way, and then when people switch off of those meds, there's a period of weight gain and then stabilization. And there is data to support that, in the sense that if you just compare Truvada to placebo, for example, the Truvada suppresses the weight. And for example, people who have higher efavirenz levels in their system because of the way they metabolize the tripla, their weight stays lower than people with lower efavirenz levels. So it seems like the older meds were suppressing weight in some way. How much were they suppressing weight, I think, is not totally clear, and I think it's different for each person. And the other thing I'd really like to emphasize is that obviously not everyone is different. And so some people will make a switch of meds and not gain any weight. Some people will make a switch of meds and gain a little bit. The challenge that we're seeing is there's a small proportion of people who either start HIV meds the first time or make a switch and actually gain substantial weight, 10, 20, 30 pounds. And then what we see is new high blood pressure, new diabetes, basically new complications. And that doesn't happen for everyone. It's a subset. It's probably 10% or so that gain a substantial amount, but for those individuals, it's very significant. The other thing we don't know, and I think this is really crucial, the other thing we don't know is whether that weight change with these specific HIV meds reverses if a person changes the med. So let's say an individual has taken tripla, switched to Biktarvy, gained weight. Will their weight then go back to baseline with a switch back to tripla? We don't know that. And we don't know if it's more similar to the lipodystrophy changes that tended to be long-term and didn't reverse even with stoppage of medications. There are some case reports of the weight reversing with a switch of meds, but they're only case reports. So we really need to understand better whether these weight changes reverse. And in my opinion, what is causing them? Is it side effects of the newer meds, or is it side effects of the older meds that we just didn't fully appreciate at the time, during the years when they were our first line go-to meds?
Wow. Okay, I didn't even think about that. So just to like reflect it back to you to make sure I'm understanding. So the unknowns that we have, we don't know if it's the newer medicines raising people's weight or the older medicines suppressing their weight, right? That's the first problem. And then we don't know if we were to switch medicines, if that'll actually go back, if the weight will decrease. We don't know that yet. So 3 unknowns.
I think that's exactly right, Michael, and very well said. Yeah. Why don't I pause there? I've said a lot so far. I'm going to talk more about the study that will help us hopefully answer some of these questions and get some more insight. But let me pause there and just see questions or comments or feedback thus far.
Well, I have one question. I can just remember back in the day, so to speak, when people started HIV meds, we were happy to see that there was weight gain. You know, like especially if people were sort of wasting away, we look forward to that weight gain. But this is not the same thing as that we're talking about.
You know, Michael, that's such a good point. Such a good point. So I think there are 2 pieces of this, if you will. There is the individual whose HIV has not been treated, whose viral load is detectable, who is underweight, and who with HIV meds and suppression of the viral load gains that weight back, and that is healthy. And we want that absolutely. And we refer to that as a return to health. That weight is a return to health, and we absolutely want that. What is happening, though, is that a subset of individuals, a proportion of individuals, again, not all, continue gaining weight beyond what we would consider healthy or that return to health phenomenon. And those individuals who continue beyond what would be, let's say, healthy weight and continue to gain and then develop high blood pressure, high blood sugar, you know, those sorts of complications, that's really where we want to focus and better understand and ideally prevent those kind of longer term complications.
Brian, can I add a little bit to that as well?
Absolutely. That sounds like Rachel. Yeah, Rachel, please go ahead.
Nope.
Oh,
she there?
Rachel, we heard you for a second, then oh, there you are.
Better? Okay, sorry. Bluetooth earbuds, not playing along. Yeah, one of the things that I find the most interesting is the studies that are the ART initiation in sub-Saharan Africa with the integrases, where it's explicitly in African women more than men, and more, it seems like, than in among other populations. And correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but it seems that it's the weight gain occurs even more pronounced in women who are already overweight or obese at baseline, right? So the return to health part, this is not people who are starting with a very low CD4 and are sick. This is people who are already sort of surpassed healthy weight when they're initiating ART.
Thank you, Rachel, for adding those things. So, and I think those are good, really good points. So the other things that have come out of these studies is the individuals who are more likely to gain what's in the studies as excess weight or substantial weight and be at risk for these complications. There seem to be differences by sex at birth, and there seem to be differences by race and ethnicity. And in particular, Black African women and Black African American women seem to have a higher propensity to gain this so-called excess weight when they are taking these HIV medications. Again, something that is not fully understood.
Is that the only population, or are there other populations that we see this in?
Yeah, it's a good question, Michael. So depending on the study, I would say that's the most consistent finding, but I have seen literature showing that it's more likely in Latino, Latina, Latinx populations as well, and in other people of color. And again, I think the explanation may be complex and may involve a lot of socioeconomic factors. And when one looks at a weight trajectory overall in this country, in individuals with HIV or without HIV, there are similar trends and similar patterns of weight and obesity. So how much of this is specific to people with HIV and how much of this is following overall patterns and trends, I think is also up for conversation and debate.
Right. And what about, like, I mean, you were saying at the beginning that weight gain is a complicated, multivariate problem. Could it be simply like diet? How do they know that it's not just diet, that it's like, you know, these medicines are actually doing it?
Yeah, so I think that there are a ton of factors when we think about what we eat, when we think about activity level. I mean, there's so many things what we can talk about. And that's why I think when this first started coming out, okay, there's a difference between weight with Atripla and with Tivicay. Those sorts of questions were being asked. Well, is it, you know, we recommended everyone take Atripla on an empty stomach. Is it just, and we recommend, you know, other meds with food. Is it just a matter of food intake or activity level? But now so many studies, big studies that have controlled for all those factors and really honed in on just what is the difference when people take this med compared to this med, they still find a difference. So I think we're at a point now where we can say there does seem to be some difference between the medications. That said, we can't ignore all those other factors you're getting at. And, you know, if, you know, an individual has gained weight while taking these meds, that's the first conversation we have is, okay, well, it might be the meds, but also how's your diet? How's your activity level? What else can we do, you know, to help reduce weight and prevent the complications?
Right. And that was going to be my next question. Do we know if even if it's the medicines that are doing this, has there been any sort of looking at interventions on just like people limiting their diet or increasing their physical activity to like combat the drug? That might be a drug problem. In other words, it wasn't that it was the food was leading them there, or it wasn't their activity, but increasing those or like taking further control of those, could that fix this for people?
I'm not aware of studies looking at that. I know that there's a study going on at the Hutch right now for people with HIV looking at an exercise intervention. I do not know if they are looking at, if they are breaking down that analysis by what medications people take or not. I'm not sure if they're doing that.
Cool. Let's see, does anyone else have a question since we've stopped right here?
Yeah.
Don't be shy. You can also type it into the chat box if you don't want to ask it yourself. I'll see it that way, or just raise your hand if you want to speak.
I'm trying.
Go ahead. Oh, yes.
Oh, okay. I kind of follow I knew this would be a way over my head, but I'm one of the people that benefit from this because I take these drugs. And so I stopped taking Descovy because I gained 65 pounds from the time, you know, like maybe 6 months before the pandemic started. Then I had to have this really weird surgery in my throat. And afterwards I couldn't eat, obviously. So I ate donuts and I totally gained weight. I've never gained weight before. I'm trying not to ramble, but there you go. And so I'm mostly curious as to, you know, is this growth, you know, it's all on my stomach. I don't have any weight anywhere but at my stomach. And it just seems really weird. But my doctor looked at me and since I told her I didn't want to take, you know, that drug anymore, I went back to Truvada, and I hopefully am, you know, going to get better soon. So my question is really, is there some sort of fix to the, you know, this weight gain? Like I'm walking all the time and my blood pressure's gone back down.
That's good.
So hopefully, I've always been thin and I've just never had this problem. So I don't know. I feel so stupid because I don't know what it's like to have a stomach.
Sorry, you go ahead, Michael.
I wasn't going to say anything.
I will just say, Leo, I believe it is. Leo, thank you for sharing that. And you are not alone. That is an experience that other people have had as well. And I have certainly talked with people who've had that same very frustrating experience. The answer, frankly, is we don't know yet the best thing to do. Again, we don't fully know the reason why some people gain weight on Descovy and others don't. And we don't fully know the best way to reverse that, if you will, or address that. And that's one of the things we're hoping to learn from this study we'll be talking about. So I appreciate you sharing your experience. You certainly are not alone. And hopefully we will learn more.
Yes, thank you, Leo, for sharing that.
Other questions or comments, or shall I dive into the study and what it involves? And there certainly will be more time for questions and thoughts.
Why don't we dive on in and see how that goes?
Sounds great. A quick aside, Michael, can you give me a goal time that I should wrap up talking about the study?
7 o'clock.
Okay.
Whenever we end, we end. So if we reach,
sounds good. Okay,
we'll be fine.
Perfect. So, I think I've talked a lot about the background and the reason for the study, and I think the goals and design of the study will sort of fit with what we've been talking about. One thing to highlight here is that this study does involve some individuals switching their integrase inhibitor, their Tivicay or Biktarvy, to an NNRTI called doravirine, also known as Pyfeltro, if I remember right. And so I just wanted to highlight quickly the reason that was chosen here. So there is, again, some suggestion that NRTIs do not have this effect on weight. And then doravirine specifically it has some advantages. It's 1 pill a day. It doesn't have many drug-drug interactions. It doesn't cause the vivid dreams and the side effects that efavirenz, the older NNRTI, did. So that is why it was chosen here. I probably should have been clear at the beginning that I don't have any financial disclosures or conflicts of interest or financial reasons to favor any med or another. I'm doing this because I think it's clinically important and very relevant, but that's the reason doravirine is involved. So the hypothesis, if you will, is that individuals who are taking an integrase inhibitor with TAF-FTC, again, that's Descovy, who then switch to doravirine along with 2 other NRTIs, so that will be the new regimen, will experience a reduction in weight or at least a slowing or stoppage of weight gain at the 48-week mark. There's also a part of this, and I'll go into this more, that involves a switch from Descovy to Truvada. So the secondary part of this is looking at, will individuals lose weight, or will their sort of weight gain be halted by switching Descovy to Truvada? So those are the 2 big questions being asked here. Individuals who enroll in the study will be followed and monitored for 48 weeks. It's open label, meaning people will know which medications they are taking. There won't be sort of matched placebos and everything like that. But folks who enroll will be randomized to one of 3 arms, which I'll talk about. Let me first talk about who will be enrolling in the study or will have the potential to enroll in the study. So individuals with BMI, so it's body mass index, so that's weight over height. So that's BMI over 27 and a half, who have experienced at least 10% weight gain in the 1 to 3 years after starting an integrase inhibitor with Descovy. The integrase inhibitors being included in the study, again, are dolutegravir, so that's Tivicay, Biktarvy, that's what's in Biktarvy, or raltegravir, which is Isentress. There is another integrase inhibitor out there, elvitegravir, which is in Stribild and is in Genvoya. That is not being included here. And the primary reason is that integrase inhibitor requires a booster. There's a medication called cobicistat included in it. And so it's unknown what effect that booster has on weight, probably some effect. And so individuals, if they were to be taking that and then switch off it, they'd be switching two meds, elvitegravir and cobicistat, and it would be very difficult to interpret which of those switches led to any effect. So folks who enroll in this study will at baseline be taking one of these integrase inhibitors I've listed here with Descovy, and then will be randomized 1 to 1 to 1, meaning an equal number of individuals in each of these arms. So arm 1 will involve a switch to doravirine, the NRTI, along with TAF-FTC, that's Descovy. So that's basically just a switch of integrase inhibitor to doravirine to discover what effect that has. Arm 2 involves switching the integrase inhibitor to doravirine and switching TAF-FTC to TDF-FTC, so Descovy to Truvada. So that's kind of a full regimen switch the integrase inhibitor to doravirine, switch the Descovy to Truvada, and see what impact that has. And then arm 3 will be continue the baseline regimen, so that will give good comparison.
So there's no way just to see if the TAF versus the TDF, we're not just like, there's not just a switch with just those two?
There's not a switch with just those two. Good point. There's not. Yep. That is correct.
So you still think they'll be able to figure out how much, if they see a weight gain change, how much of it was due to doravirine and how much it was due to going back to Truvada? They'll be able to tell the difference from that?
Yeah, good question. So I think that the key there will be comparing arm 1 and arm 2. Mm-hmm. So if we compare arm 1 and arm 2, really the difference between those arms is the TAF and the TDF.
Right.
So let's say individuals who switch to those arms lose weight, but those two arms lose the same amount of weight. Well, then it was probably the switch to doravirine that did it. But if arm 2, if that group is dramatically different than the others, then maybe that TAF to TDF switch had an impact as well. But you're absolutely right. There's no arm where it's only a Descovy to Truvada switch.
Now, you also said that Truvada suppresses people's weight, and we didn't realize how much. So how do we know that maybe Truvada's not having an effect, but it's just suppressing weight again? Like, in other words, wouldn't using that just negate that whole arm?
So I think it's a big outstanding question whether the difference in weight is related to the TAF doing something we don't understand, or whether it's the TDF suppressing the weight. And frankly, I don't know that this study is going to fully answer that. Okay. However, integrase inhibitors compared to, let's say, NNRTIs like the doravirine, here it's a little bit different. There are some people who have studied the ways that integrase inhibitors might lead to weight gain, and there are some proposed mechanisms for that. And there are some things that are going to be checked here that will have implications to answering the question of, well, is it the integrase inhibitor causing weight gain, or is it the NRTI suppressing the weight? So I'll come back and highlight that towards the end. There are some things that I think may answer that question or may help answer that question.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So talking more about who will have the option of enrolling in this study. So this is for, again, adults with the BMI. You can see there, taking the medications there. There are a couple of caveats to medications being taken. For example, if the TAF or the Descovy was not started at the same time, it's okay as long as it was more than 48 weeks prior. And switching integrase inhibitors, even a switch from the elvitegravir, is okay as long as a person has taken one of these three listed here for at least 24 weeks. And again, the study will focus on individuals who have gained at least 10% body weight in the first 1 to 3 years of taking that regimen. So to your point, Michael, like let's say a person started Biktarvy 8 years ago, but then just has had experienced weight gain within the last 2 years, that seems less likely to be related to the medications and might more likely be related to diet and exercise and other things going on in life. And so that person wouldn't be eligible. But the person who would be eligible here would be the person who's taking these medications for a couple of years, has a suppressed viral load. Everyone coming in will have a suppressed viral load, and then has experienced weight gain over the couple of years since starting those meds.
So here's another question. I know me, when it comes to math and calculating the body mass index, I don't know how to do it. And I'm sure there are other people. Is this something that if I was interested in this study, you guys would figure this out for me? If I've actually had the body mass index that you need? Because that seems beyond me.
We can absolutely figure it out. It is in the medical chart. We're happy to review charts, double check. And there are calculators online as well. So if you're curious, because I don't know my weight in kilograms or height in
right.
meters, but if there are calculators online. If you Google BMI calculator, where you can put in weight in pounds, height in inches, and it will give you a number.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, great question.
Any other questions?
Sorry,
I don't see any. Okay.
So some exclusion criteria, and I'll be explicit here. I think these are rather strict, and so things that would make a person not eligible for this study include any past virologic failure or any past resistance. It's certainly a conservative, cautious approach. There are, some resistance mutations where these medications would remain active, but this, I think, has been set as a cautious, conservative criteria. So really the focus here is individuals who are taking, let's say, Biktarvy or dolutegravir with Descovy, maybe raltegravir with Descovy, and haven't had virologic rebound and resistance on past regimens. It's okay to have taken past regimens, but viral load has to be routinely suppressed. Individuals who are pregnant or breastfeeding won't be eligible. Those with kidney trouble won't be eligible. And the primary reason for that is that the randomization may include a switch to TDF, and TDF, the Truvada, does seem to have higher risk to the kidneys than TAF or Descovy. And that's similar with osteoporosis or osteopenia. So anyone with known diagnoses of those won't be eligible. There are some medications that would make a person ineligible because of the interactions with the study meds. And then the other thing would be any plan to change or initiate medications, other medications, non-HIV medications that could affect weight. And so there's examples here. If a person is taking these medications and has been taking them for a long time and the doses are stable and they're not likely to change, then that's fine. But if these have just been started, the doses are ramping up, there's an issue and one of these meds may stop or the dose may need to be changed, then that wouldn't be eligible.
I had one other question. I noticed that there was an age, like it has to be 18 and we're used to that. Is there a cap? Is there an age at the other end? Because I know a lot of our CAB members really are concerned about the studies ending at 65, for instance, and they're, personally, they might be older than 65, but they're also concerned that people who are 65, 75, as the HIV epidemic grows, we're not following those people. Is there a cap on the age?
No cap, as far as I am aware. Rachel, correct me if that's wrong, but I'm nearly certain there's no cap. And frankly, I think it would be great to enroll, individuals who are in their 60s, 70s. I think those folks are generally underrepresented in clinical trials. At our clinic journal club this morning, we talked about a study that looked at dolutegravir for folks over 65 and didn't find an increase in weight in a group of individuals with HIV over age 65, but we had a lot of concerns about the methods and how they did the study. So, people are trying to look at that, and I think it would be great. I think it would be great to enroll, people who are in older age groups,
right?
People who are female sex at birth, trans people, people generally underrepresented in trials would be great to enroll. And people of color would be fantastic to enroll for a number of reasons, because again, it does seem like this may differentially impact people of color. So
yeah, that'd be great. Also, just to point out, because Bonner was leaving, but Bonner was asking if he was interested in this study. He was saying, should he reach out to his medical clinic doctor? And I told him, and I'm telling everyone here, if you're interested in the study, the easiest thing would be to send a text to our number, 206-773-7129. And I also put into the chat some of our PDFs that are the tear-off sheets for people, and it also has our number on there. If you couldn't remember to write it down, if you want to download one of those PDFs, it'll give you the contact information and our website as well. But if anyone's interested and you want to talk more about the study or see if you fit, that's the quickest way you could get in touch with us, is by calling or texting that number. Leave us a message and we'll get back to you ASAP.
That is perfect. Thank you, Bonner, and thank you, Michael.
Yes.
So let me move forward, and then there'll be more time for questions and comments and feedback for sure. So the things that will be followed for people who enroll in the study. So the primary thing will be change in weight. The other things will be waist circumference, and then a number of lab parameters, things like insulin resistance, cholesterol, other things related to weight that we really want to see. We really want to see how they change with the switch in meds and compare the arms as well. Individuals who enroll in the study also will have a DEXA scan at baseline and then at 48 weeks. And the DEXA scan primarily is to look at the composition in terms of fat versus lean mass. Because the other thing, and I didn't mention this yet, but the other thing we really don't know is when weight increases taking a specific HIV medication, is that weight fat or is it lean mass? Because those are very different when we consider risk of diabetes and other things. And also, is that weight accumulation, is it mostly, is it visceral? Is it inside the belly, around the organs, which has been shown to be higher risk, or is it elsewhere? Is it more peripheral? So individuals will have DEXA scans at 2 time points to help us understand the composition of the weight change, which has implications for the risks and the diabetes, the insulin resistance, the other metabolic complications, if you will. There also are some other lab markers being followed, some immunologic things, markers of inflammation. And then this is one thing that I think might be interesting in terms of understanding the mechanism here, adipokines are chemicals released by our fat cells, and they help regulate appetite and weight. And there's been at least one study I know of that showed that when a person switched off a protease inhibitor to dolutegravir, their adipokine levels changed. Now, is that an explanation for the weight gain? We do not know. It's a complicated question, and there's some complex controversy around adipokines and their role. But I think that this is important to do because it could help us understand why this is happening. Also, the drug levels in the Truvada and the Descovy will be checked and compared to weight, because everyone is different and everyone metabolizes drugs differently. And for example, with efavirenz or a tripla, it's been found that having a higher level in the system, people who naturally genetically metabolize a tripla more slowly and have higher levels, weight is more suppressed, versus people who naturally genetically metabolize efavirenz and a tripla more rapidly, weight tends to be higher. But that hasn't been done yet comparing Truvada and Descovy. So that also will be a piece of it. So there's a lot going on here. There's a lot being followed and tracked. And again, our hope is that this adds important insights for everyone for a better understanding of the effects of the medications. Are the side effects we're seeing from the new medications or the old medications? Why is this happening? And then coming back to Leo's question, what is best to do about it? Is switching HIV meds best? Is not switching best? So there's a lot going on here. Mm-hmm. This is a summary of the schedule of visits, and the asterisk indicates fasting visits. And I mentioned the DEXA scans and following height and weight. And in this study, it's minimum waist circumference instead of maximal waist circumference. I don't think that's a big deal, but those are the things that will be tracked at the visits. And the doravirine, the NNRTI, is being supplied by the study. The other drugs in the study will come from a standard prescription and usual pharmacy and usual insurance and billing, and there will be reimbursement for each visit and extra reimbursement for the DEXA scans, the exact amount of which we are still confirming, but there will be reimbursement and available funds for parking, transportation, and things of that nature. So the contact info is there. I love the tear-offs, Michael. Those are fantastic.
And just to let you know that you had the number wrong there. It's 773, not 733.
Thank you.
I also wanted to point out to people, just because we've started this switch, we're now paying for screening visits. We give you a $20 reimbursement for your time if you are screening, which is something we've not done before. So that's something that's new to our process, and that's going forward. We're going to be doing that for all of our studies. So just to let people know, that's one of the changes that you're going to see a lot more as we talk about our other studies.
Michael, did I get that right? 773?
You got it.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you for keeping me honest.
Yep.
So that really is what I wanted to summarize, but I am more than happy to field questions or comments or any feedback.
Yeah, so we're going to open it up to people. Any comments, questions, concerns? Well, I can say I know that one of the things that I've noticed when I've talked about this study out into the community is that almost everybody feels like the excessive weight gain, broadly defined, is affecting them. And I've heard a lot of people report back that they feel like when they've brought it up with their doctor, that their doctor has not listened to them, that their doctor, like, they feel like it's their medicines and they just had a hunch, or they've just been thinking that because they know their diet better. But the doctor they feel like their doctor's second guessing them and is maybe suggesting, some of them have said like, they felt like they were not willing to hear that it might be the medicines, but that should not be the case now that we have definitive proof, right? I mean, it could be back 5 months ago when people were reporting this, we didn't know as much, but every doctor should be brought up to speed and know this now. Like if they were to go back to their doctor and say, okay, I've just learned this from today's meeting, and I'm on this medicine, they should be able to point to that a little bit more, right?
Michael, thanks for bringing that up. I think so. I'll just give my perspective and my opinion. I feel convinced, having reviewed this literature, that yes, this excess weight gain from certain meds is a thing. It does happen. Doesn't happen to everyone, but it does happen. So I think it is something that must be considered. Again, though, I think what we really don't know, and I really want to know, is why is that happening and what is best to do about it. And one thing I worry is if the issue really is not the new meds, but it's the old meds were having more toxicity than we realized and suppressing weight in ways we didn't understand, then perhaps switching back to those meds isn't the right step. Maybe that's not the best solution. It could turn out to be the right move for some people, but I think we just don't know yet. So is this a thing and should it be considered? I would say yes. What to do about it right now before we fully understand it, I think really comes down to a personal decision and a conversation with the doctor about the options. And because all of the meds, of course, have their possible side effects. And if a person, let's say has experienced an increase in weight on Descovy that's bothersome or is having complications, switching back to Truvada might be the right move for that person, but Truvada has higher risk of side effects to the kidneys, side effects to the bones. There's more monitoring of the kidneys. So I think it really depends on the person and a full understanding of the risks and benefits of each medication.
We had a question from Brooke in the chat asking about, saying that Doravirine came out in August 2018, and they were curious about knowing its current role or preference in the spectrum of all HIV meds. Where does Doravirine fall?
That's a good question. So I see it as a very good medication. It is in the NNRTI family, and it is not on the list of medications we prefer for someone starting their first ever regimen. We're generally, again, reaching for integrase inhibitors. The biggest limitation to it, in my opinion, is that the combo pill that has Doravirine, TDF, the older tenofovir, and lamivudine. There's no combo pill with TAF. Like there's no Doravirine Descovy combo pill. Okay. I have prescribed Doravirine most often as part of a combination for a person who has developed resistance to the first line, if you will, medications. I have not prescribed it, I think, even once for somebody for their first ever regimen. It overall is well tolerated. It doesn't have the drug interaction issues of some of the other NRTIs. It doesn't have the mental health or vivid dream things that efavirenz had. There are some benefits to it. It's a good medication. We're not reaching for it routinely, but I've certainly see it be a valuable part of a combination therapy.
Right. So the Doravirine would be replacing it's an NNRTI, and it would be replacing the the integrase inhibitors. But I thought we like the integrase inhibitors for other things. Does Doravirine also bring those other things, or are we basically going to maybe have a situation where you trade off because of the weight question, but you're going to lose some of the other benefits?
So good point. Thank you, Michael, for bringing me back to that. So I think the key here is we don't typically reach for Doravirine as a first ever regimen, but for someone who has taken integrase inhibitors or other therapy for a while, has a suppressed viral load, is doing well, then it is a very, very reasonable option to replace the integrase inhibitor. There's no risk there of losing control of HIV or losing viral suppression, especially because the study is being so conservative and safe, and not including anyone who has resistance or virologic failure in the past. So for the people who enroll in the study, I do not have concern that they will lose their control of HIV if they're switching to doravirine. Does that?
Yep.
Did I explain that all right? Yeah.
And I'm full of questions tonight. I had another question because I know that Descovy is used as PrEP. Are they seeing weight gain in people who take it as PrEP?
So great question. Yes, if one compares Truvada to Descovy, like in the big Discover trial, there is a difference in weight over time. About a kilo is the average difference. So 2.2 pounds about.
Okay.
However, it's another very interesting story where the issue really may be the Truvada suppressing weight, because so if you compare Truvada to Descovy, yes, Descovy is more weight gain.
Right.
But if you compare Truvada to placebo, weight goes down on Truvada. And this is really interesting. If you compare Truvada to cabotegravir, the new injectable integrase inhibitor that's coming for PrEP, that's right around the corner for PrEP, weight is different. But again, it's because the Truvada suppressed weight, not because the cabotegravir increased weight.
Okay.
So I frankly am not convinced that cabotegravir, like integrase inhibitors, are directly causing a lot of weight gain. I think the issue may largely be the Truvada, but jury's out, and we need to answer this question.
Right, and that's what the study's designed to do, to give us some of information, some data that might point to an answer.
Exactly.
So I'm going to turn to any of us here. Any questions you want to ask of Brian? Don't be shy. So I have another question. So is a year long enough to really see a difference in terms of all the things that we want? Like you were looking, I could see weight gain being enough time, but like some of the other changes with the insulin or the things, is that a year is basically good enough? It doesn't need to be longer?
I think it's another really good question. The reason I think it might be sufficient is that in the studies, most of the difference in weight gain between the meds happened within the first year, generally within the first 9 to 12 months.
Okay.
And I suspect that's why the designers of the trial chose that duration. Okay. There are exceptions. Rachel mentioned a big study that was done in sub-Saharan Africa that found that Black African women gained more weight taking these meds than others. And for them, they were the group where weight had not plateaued in a year, even out to a year and a half, it still seemed to be rising. So there are exceptions to that. Okay. But it seems like this difference in weight gain we're talking about mostly happens within the first year. So I'm optimistic that yes, that will be enough time.
Okay. And we had a question, Larry Pike wanted to know if there was any requirement around CD4 counts.
Good question. There's not. The only requirement is suppressed viral loads, I believe, for, I had it on the slide, was 6 or 12 months. Routinely suppressed viral loads.
Wow.
Are the primary requirement. That's a great question.
Wow. So Bill is saying the first thing he noticed when we were in isolation was that he binge ate and gained more weight. And so he heard that this was commonplace. And so he wants to know how you're going to differentiate.
Yeah, it's a great question, Bill. And I think your point is very well taken, that there may be individuals who've gained weight while on these meds, and it's not related to the meds, in which case a switch of meds will not lead to a difference. So you are absolutely right, that may happen. It's one of the reasons why in studies we try to accumulate enough people, to eliminate those other effects and really allow us to make these comparisons between the meds. And it's one of the reasons why in this study, the requirement is weight gain in the first 1 to 3 years after starting the med. Now, yes, somebody could have started Biktarvy right before the pandemic, then been in social isolation, and then had all these other factors. And we're never going to be able to eliminate every factor that contributes to weight change. There are just too many.
Right.
But there are enough specifications in the inclusion criteria here, and hopefully enough people that we will eliminate those confounding factors, if you will.
And that's why we have usually more than one person involved in a study, is to get it to have a lot of different examples to look at the data that comes from all of them. Which brought us to me. Is this phase 1?
Michael, can I ask a question?
Sure can.
So the question that I have is, are there going to be enough of the different kinds of integrase inhibitors to be able to differentiate among them, or is it just like overall?
Yeah, great question. And my understanding is that the primary outcome is overall integrase inhibitor to doravirine switch. Your question, I think, is a very important one, because it's really the dolutegravir and bictegravir that have been implicated as being more of an issue here than the others. Will there be enough data to compare dolutegravir switch to doravirine to bictegravir switch to doravirine to raltegravir switch to doravirine? I suspect not, given the goal numbers in the trial, but I don't know that for sure.
And so this medicine is going to be, the one medicine is going to be given by the study. The other meds, if people need to switch, that's going to be taken care of outside of the study. But what about when the study ends? Do they get to continue with doravirine, or is that going to be something they're going to have to pick up as well?
Yeah, great question. So that after the study ends, the study itself will no longer provide the medication, of course, but the person could certainly talk to their doctor about getting a prescription and getting it through their usual channels and continuing it that way if that's their preference.
Because it's not like it's an investigational drug, so to speak, where it's not available still.
Exactly. And that's a great point that I probably should have mentioned, Michael. Doravirine is not an experimental investigational thing, as was mentioned in the chat. I think Brooke mentioned it. Yeah, was approved a couple of years ago, and we are actively using it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Other questions that we have? Don't be shy. Well, we'll give people a chance, but I wanted to thank you, Brian, first of all, for speaking with us and explaining the study. It seems like it's a pretty straightforward study, which I think reflects what people's lack of a question, because it doesn't seem very complex in terms of pretty basic, I think, in terms of what it's going to do. And I just wanted to thank you, though, for kind of bringing it to our attention, as well as doing it in a very coherent and clear way. I think it was very well described. So I want to thank you for that. And Bill says thanks as well. So did anyone else have anything they wanted to bring up with this excessive weight gain? The whole idea. I'm still interested if it's going to, like, I don't know, the whole Truvada suppressing weight has just been curious to me. I've not heard that before. And so now I have all sorts of questions about how that may be affecting, I'm thinking again, more of PrEP, people in PrEP. And if they go to, because a lot of people have gone to Descovy, and I'm wondering if, I'm just going to ask my friends who are on Descovy if they've seen anything like that, like where it's gone up for them, and if they're freaked out about it, because being gay men, they're usually freaked out about it. All right, any last questions that we wanted to bring up? Going once. All right, so Brooke says thank you. He's going to take his Biktarvy tummy out for a bike ride. Sounds good, Brooke. Well, thank you all very much. I guess we will wrap up for today. This is usually when we ended, when we met in person, so we're right on time with that. So once again, Brian, I wanted to thank you for spending some time with us, explaining the study. And if any of you have any other questions, you can always reach out to me via email. I can get them to Brian. Also, you can also call the 206-773-7129 number. If you wanted to chat with someone, you could do it by text, or you could call and leave a voicemail. And don't forget also about our website. It's easy if you just put uwactu.com in the, in the URL. You'll be able to find it, no problem. So again, thank you all for taking the time and to join us on a sunny day, and let me return you to your day so you can get some of that sunshine before the sun goes down. All right. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes. See you next month.
Good evening. Hopefully
when we go over our updates from IAS and ACTG. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. All right.